Welcome back to Strange Form. Today we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to be looking at a figure that hasn't come out yet, and my thoughts about its accuracy and whether or not it's something I would buy. That is NECA's new Big Chap from Romulus. I have a lot of thoughts on this as it's not quite where I want it to be, and its accuracy is lacking in a few different departments, but I don't actually know if that's true, in that this one seems to be from something that was cut from Romulus, i.e. a scene where the Big Chap was ravaging the station. So this one might actually be completely and utterly accurate to that version. But as for its accuracy to the original Alien, it leaves something to be desired. And I'm going to go over why, and my thoughts about what they could have done different, and what other companies are doing in this regard. Now, this episode is a little bit of a proof of concept episode, as I just had a major root canal where they not only drilled into my tooth, but into the side of my jaw in order to excise an infection. So I'm doing this video without painkillers and right after a major surgery, to prove I can get videos out much more quickly without the mask or the scripts, just freeforming it as it were. So I hope you enjoy this one, as this is how the video formats are going to be pretty much from now on, except I'm still going to do some scripted content here and there. Now, what's my issue with the NECA figure, you might ask? My main issue is the mouth and the forward portion of the dome. The original NECA Alien always suffered from having almost too big of a jaw. And I've said before, I think the reason for this is they're taking their design cues from the stunt suit that was used towards the end of the film when Ripley shot it out into space. This suit is actually considerably different, especially in the head portion, than the one that Balaji Badeo was wearing. And it's one that can be seen at the Seattle EMP. If you ever go and look at that one, you can see how much different it is than what we see throughout the rest of the film. And one of the big differences there is the thinness of the dome and the sort of squareness of the jaw. Now I'm going to say something a little controversial here, in that I'm not even sure that the alien costume at the Mopop in Seattle is an authentic screen-used piece. And the reason is that when I asked someone who was there, their basic response was that they thought that it was a stunt costume used in the latter part of the film. However, there are many inaccuracies across the costume, as well as the face, that can't be matched up to anything that was actually in the film. But after that, I pressed the issue harder by actually getting a hold of the curator for the museum, and asked him where this costume came from and how it was authenticated. And he said that it was donated from the Paul Allen estate, but no, it hadn't been authenticated to any specific scene. So my theory is that it's one of two things. It's either a costume that wasn't used, or it's a costume that they did end up using, but a reproduction head. But it doesn't even bear much of a resemblance at all to the one that can be seen at the Giger Museum. So it's something of an oddity, and again, it hasn't been authenticated by anyone. So again, I'm not sure if this one is even from the actual film. So if NECA or any other company is basing their figures on that one, they're basically basing their figures on something that's sort of an offshoot or an oddity. Let me know in the comments what you think. But this seems to be the design cue that NECA has always jumped off from. And so one issue that they've always had is that in order to get the jaw to hinge and push back, it has to be extremely square. So the maw has to be kind of squared off so that the musculature that's hidden under the cheek can then rise and lower in order to close the mouth. But this is something NECA has always gotten wrong, in that the way the alien closes its mouth, it never actually clasps its front teeth. It has sort of a fish mouth, and so when the mouth closes, it's got an ovular design to the front of the teeth where the incisors don't touch, but the canines clasp over each other, allowing you to see the inner mouth slightly. This is something really good and accurate toy manufacturers have always understood. And this goes towards the filmmakers' understanding of biology and their philosophy of design to have form follow function. And so in the film, whenever you see the alien with its mouth shut, it has almost a grin. The way in which the cheek muscles close down, they pull back. And when it goes to open its mouth, those cheek muscles stretch and the jaw squares off, but at an angle. This is something that both the Mezco and the MAFX dealt with differently, in that the Mezco actually hinged the jaw at an angle, much like what the movie did, and sort of brilliantly hid the musculature, whereas in the MAFX give you two different heads in order to show it with its mouth open and its mouth closed, so that the design could be completely accurate both ways. However, there are a few other things that this NECA version does differently as well. Number one, it's that the forward portion of the dome is more bulbous and flat as opposed to curved back. causing the forward portion of the dome to look sort of elongated. This is very similar to the way that the main creature in Romulus looks, and I'm wondering if the designers just sort of tried to tie those two designs together. That being said, a completely accurate Big Chap should have a couple of things. Not only should the dome sort of slope back, but there should be almost like pods on the side that meet the strange under cheek sort of glands. And then going back along the crest of the head, one thing that a lot of designers get wrong is that there's actually a slight ridge to the dome. This is one that the Mafex actually recreated perfectly, but the Mezco didn't. As a matter of fact, the dome is completely smooth across the top. And this is one of those ones where the smaller version of the NECA figure, the 8-inch, doesn't quite have the ridge because of size constraints, whereas in the larger version here, actually does. And not only does it have that, its mouth and maw are actually much more proportionate to the film than the smaller version, which is largely because of the mechanics of the way the mouth has to open. These organic design principles are something that a lot of modern designers have thrown out the window. I think because of the need to blend practical effects with computer effects, they don't actually think as much about the way an organic structure collapses and expands. And so it ends up looking sort of rubber band-like. The case in point is the Predator films. In the earlier Predator films, Stan Winston completely understood the organics of a cheek muscle that would have to expand outward and then collapse back inward. In other words, the Predator had a sort of concave cheek muscle that could expand outward as the muscles of the jaw extended. The later versions of the Predator, after Predator 2 that is, sort of did away with this principle, having a completely squared off jaw, where when it opened, the cheek muscles expanded this way, but they didn't curve back in and show proper cheekbones when the thing closed its mouth. The later versions of the Alien really went with just the sinew on the side of the face, these muscles that stretch when the thing opens its mouth and collapse when it closes its mouth. But the original Big Chap from the first film had two muscles that pulled back at the cheek, so that when it closed its mouth, it was pulled back into a smile, and when it opened its mouth, these released and it was able to open wider. And even NECA actually has these muscles on the Alien. It's just their desire to have an open and closed mouth mechanic on such a small figure means that they went with a very different hinge than the Mezco. But the Mezco understood that the Alien rarely ever closed its mouth completely, and I think NECA wanted to show they were thinking more about the later Alien films, where the mouth would close and the teeth would clasp, and then it would open in sort of a squared off fashion so that the inner mouth could come out. The earlier Big Chap design had a mouth that didn't open straight, it opened at a hinged angle. And I think that sort of fish-like design is what NECA was trying to copy here in this newest version of the Big Chap. The problem is that the lower jaw isn't prominent enough. The chin needs to stick out. If you look at any of the Alien designs, it actually has a fairly prominent chin below the mouth. So there's a design flow from the top of the dome into the mouth, across the teeth, and then jetting out to the chin. So I'm not completely in love with how they've done this. To me, it really looks like the Bandai SH Figure Arts version, which never was my favorite design. The face is entirely too exaggerated, and the head's a little bit bulbous. But again, it's not a terrible looking figure, and it's nothing that I would hold against anybody for buying. I'll probably pick one up to review it, but I'm probably not going to hold on to it, unless there are some major design changes before September. That being said, there's always a little bit of biases when it comes to what you like about the aesthetics of a design. And it has to do with when you saw the film, how old you were, what you were responding to, what parts of the design resonate with you the most. In that the things that you enjoy about the design could be completely different. You might really enjoy a squared off jaw and a more muscular looking maw, such as this one, or you might like the sort of sloped head of this new version. But again, my main issue is that the design just doesn't look like the original Big Chap. And it reminds me of that episode of Arrested Development, where he's like, glasses on, hair down, hair up, glasses off, glasses back on, hair up. In other words, NECA just keeps shooting past the mark. And I think that they need to actually sit down and look at the original design and decide how they want to put together a perfect figure. And part of that might actually be just getting rid of the opening and closing mouth and actually including a couple of different heads. Which brings me to another issue I have with the new NECA version. That inner mouth is entirely too thin. And that's something they tried to get away with the new Romulus figure. And that's one of the things I didn't like about it, how thin the inner mouth was. And it looks like something they're carrying on to other figures. So that sort of bugs me. I do sort of wish they had done the dead battle damage version first, but we'll see how this one turns out. I doubt that one's far behind. Like I said in the last video, I really hope for a 1/4 Alien Romulus figure. I would definitely pick that up. Now, I'd like to thank you for joining me on this one, and hopefully I can get videos out more quickly with this unscripted format. As for the future, I think the next episode's probably going to be about the new teaser trailer dropped about Alien Earth. And after that, I have a really awesome vehicle to show you guys. It's one I'm really excited about and was happy to be able to grab. And if you'd like to help the channel, I'm going to drop the Patreon link at the bottom of each episode description. And on top of that, links to the merchandise. I'm also considering starting a Strange Form P.O. box, in case anybody would like to send anything they'd like reviewed. But as for now, as always, remember, never stop collecting.